We are seeing more millennials in leadership positions in workplaces today. Some are optimistic that they bring innovative leadership styles that can address today's complex problems. However, others are rather skeptical. Discrimination, job insecurity, and poor working conditions seem to be insurmountable problems that even millennial leaders struggle to address. On today's episode, we will talk about how millennial leaders are leading the battle for fairness and equity in the workplace today. I'm Nicole Curato, and this is Meet the Millennials. Our first guest on today's program is Jonathan Yabut. Jonathan provides training to startups and Fortune 500 companies on optimizing millennial talent. He is the author of 3 best-selling books and is known in Southeast Asia as the Millennial Guru. Jonathan, welcome to Meet the Millennials.
Thanks for having me, Nicole.
It's always a great opportunity to collaborate with you, especially when we talk about issues in the workplace.
And I can't wait to talk about careers.
So Jonathan, tell us, are we actually seeing the next generation of leaders who are millennials finally taking the issue of discrimination in the workplace seriously?
Definitely. So first and foremost, the millennials are always going to be woke to any social issue. This is a generation that's always been entrenched into anything that I want to know about can be accessed through social media or through Google. It starts from down to, let's say, when the SOGI bill, for example, was highlighted in the Philippines. That came about the socialization of being considerate about your labels in the workplace. So now on LinkedIn, for example, you would see people writing he, him, she, them, etc. That's just one manifestation for it. And I would expect that that would even have a halo effect through other types, down to our folks that may be disabled, indigenous people, for example, or those that may be affected by mental wellness.
So there's a celebration of diversity in the workplace. But from my understanding, meron ding debate yan na parang should employers actually care about employment equality or employment equity, right?
That's correct.
So pag sinabing employment equality, that means na everyone should have the same opportunity for hiring, promotion, or career development. But others would say, actually, that's not enough. Kasi when you start working, hindi naman pare-pareho yung starting point natin, di ba? So dapat daw employment equity. We
That's
recognize that people are different and people need different opportunities for them to thrive. What's your take on that?
I think it's good that people are finally acknowledging it. And, it might be an intellectual discussion to say na, oh, it's indigenous people, it could be people with mental illness, but it even starts down to, is your employee in the province or in the city?
Right.
There's equity there because you don't have proper internet access in the provinces compared to the urban. So the subsidies alone for internet connection needs to be leveled up or geared up when you're in the provinces. So those nuances, I'm happy to note that a lot of companies have taken that into consideration, especially when COVID-19 happened.
Oh, tell us more about that. How did COVID change the landscape of the workplace in the Philippines?
Today, you don't need to be in the office every day. And that means that you can apply for a job knowing that you're going to be remote forever. So companies like Airbnb, for example, just declare that their employees can be remote for the infinite time that Brian Chesky decides it to be, for example. If I was, let's say, in my home, and I happen to be, let's say, disabled, or as the millennials would call it, as reduced, people with reduced mobility, which, by the way, is a differentiation of the term versus being disabled, right? I can now apply for a job because I don't need to be in the office all the time. Same thing also, there are people who may be experiencing mental wellness issues, and therefore they can't socialize as much, but they're more comfortable working in the convenience of their home. They can just stay at home and still be able to be fit to work in that organization.
Do you think the concept of fitness to work is becoming more mainstream in the corporate language?
It is, and I do hope it doesn't get politicized.
What do you mean by that?
Because right now, for example, in the Philippines, if you look at the Mental Health Act, down to, let's say, the Magna Carta for disabled people, it remains to be in the hands of the company and the medical practitioner that they have hired. So let's say, for example, a typical case study is, can I let go of my employee if she happens to be mentally ill and is no longer productive because she can't go to work or she can't even submit the reports?
Yeah.
That is in the hands of the medical practitioner assigned to evaluate the competency, and also the HR and the boss who can say that, she's been out for 2 months and I can't afford to have this employee out for 2 months. So those things, there is no set rule for that. The government leaves that in the hands of the company to decide as long as they meet the definition, which by the way is generic definition of the law.
So I don't mean to sow intergenerational conflict, but we also hear na parang this is just parang being woke, di ba? Ang arte-arte ng mga millennials nung generation namin, we just suck it up. It's hard to be a woman in the corporate world. It's hard to have some disability in the workplace, and we sucked it up. Parang ang kapal naman ng mukha nyo to lobby for this. How do you respond to that kind of impression na ang arte lang ng millennials fighting for workplace equity?
I'd always say that the person who says that is a person who doesn't understand it because he's never filled in the shoes. They've never been in the situation of that person. Words do matter. Like labels alone do matter. So in Europe, you do not call them anymore as disabled people. You call them as people with reduced mobility. And that's because the word disabled assumes that I'm not competent enough to do other things. But in fact, I'm probably just disabled for 5% of the time, but 95% of the time, I'm fit to work for anything else. So that for me is something that you have to consider, because if you choose a certain word that makes me feel inferior, that affects the mindset of the individual.
And it's not just words, obviously. Words have implications.
Implications, in the end.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. We will talk to you again later, but for now, we will take a break, and when we return, we will talk to another millennial leading the fight for gender equity in the workplace. Please stay tuned. You're still watching Meet the Millennials on CNN Philippines. Our next guest is Joanna Bernice Coronacion. She's the Deputy Secretary of Sentro, or Sentro ng mga nagkakaisa at progresibong manggagawa. Hi, Nice. It's so good to meet you.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
All right. You used to work in a fast food chain, and then based on that experience, it inspired you to join a union. And usually, when some people hear the word union, parang naisip nila, ano ba yan, panggulo lang yan, they're troublemakers, rally lang ng rally. So can you tell us, ano ba ang role ng union sa Pilipinas when it comes to fighting for workplace equity?
Pag sinabi nating union, ito yung collective voice, collective power ng mga manggagawa para i-assert yung mga concerns nila, ma-raise yung mga concerns nila, at yung union yung pumuprotekta sa welfare ng mga manggagawa. So, napakahalaga ngayon na iparating sa publiko na hindi troublemakers yung mga union. In fact, dahil sa union, meron tayong mga social security benefits. Dahil sa union, kaya nating mag-participate sa mga policy-making bodies na critical for us, at napakarami pang iba.
So based on your experience, ano ba yung difference kung ikaw isa kang manggagawa tapos one-on-one nagne-negotiate ka sa boss mo, kung halimbawa workplace safety, ganyan, versus ikaw may kasama kang organization who also supports you in making that argument for better welfare in the workplace? Anong kaibahan nun?
Sobrang malaki yung pagkakaiba, Nicole, kasi hindi automatic na kapag mag-isa ka, meron kang concern, i-address kagad yung nire-raise mong issue. Pero kapag collective kayo, isa kayong union, at dahil nire-represent mo yung interest ng mga manggagawa, mas may pressure para sa management, halimbawa, to address your concerns.
Right. And of course, hindi lang siya negotiation sa workplace, negotiation din siya pagdating sa mga batas sa Pilipinas.
That's right.
And sobra akong aware na isa sa mga passions mo talaga is gender equity, at bilang bahagi ng sentro, malaki yung naging papel nyo sa pagpasa ng Expanded Maternity Leave Law. Pakikwento nga, ano bang kwento behind this law?
Yes, dun sa Expanded Maternity Leave Law, sobrang haba ng pinagdaanan namin dyan. Isa sa pinaka hindi ko makakalimutan, nung BICAM na kailangan mag-crunch ng data para patunayan sa mga lawmakers na hindi ito pagsasayang lang ng gastos or additional burden sa social security system para bigyan ng additional benefits yung mga nanay natin, or maternity leave benefits yung mga nanay natin. So nag-crunch kami ng data, yung research team nandun. So ang daming struggle, muntik pa yung mabito, pero nandun kami with our action to say na it's very important to us. So major victory siya sa amin dahil it's a hard fought. Hindi siya binigay on a silver platter.
Yeah. And actually, some people are even asking, why do we even have to pay women when they give birth and when they look after their newborn? Diba? Yung extreme comment nga nun, bakit ko babayaran yung bakasyon ng isang babae na bagong panganak? I mean, I have a different idea of what a vacation is. A woman who just gave birth is not drinking gin and tonic on a beach, right? But how do you respond to these criticisms?
Yes, naririnig ko din yan. And even the deliberation ay may mga ganyan ding concerns. Kaya ko sinasabi kanina na major victory siya para sa amin kasi it is a one step forward in improving reproductive health ng ating mga nanay. At kapag mas malusog si nanay, malusog si baby, ang pamilya at ang ating lipunan. At the same time, yung batas nagtutulak ng shared parenthood at kinikilala yung job security. Kaya sa mga nagsasabi ng may unfairness, kapag binibigyan ng leave benefits tapos with pay pa yung mga nanay, definitely hindi siya unfair kasi responsibilidad ng ating pamahalaan, ng ating lipunan na tugunan yung kalusugan ng ating pamilya. Dito talaga papasok yung pinag-uusapan pa natin kanina na equity. So, ibig sabihin, iba't iba tayong tao, may iba't iba tayong pangangailangan. So, merong pipiliin na nare-respeto natin, hindi siya magkaanak, okay lang yun. Pero meron din pipili na gusto niyang magkaanak at kung maraming pipili nun, dapat protektado sila ng mga polisiya at batas.
Oh, actually, taken for granted nga yung idea na pag nasa bahay ka at nanay ka as if hindi ka nagtatrabaho. Parang trabaho kaya mag-breastfeed, trabaho kaya maghugas ng plato.
Yeah.
Gendered lang yung ganong klaseng labor at hindi natin siya napapahalagahan.
Yes, definitely. Hindi pagpapahinga yung paghihilom at yung pag-aaruga ng bata. Kasi ang daming domestic work na kaagapay. Kaya natin sinasabi na itong batas na to nagpo-promote din ng equity, ng equality, dahil kinikilala niya na dapat yung kasama sa tahanan ni nanay ay tumutulong din sa gawaing pantahanan at pag-aalaga kay baby.
All right, thank you, Nice. Ang dami kong natutunan. These are very helpful insights. So when we return, we will hear more from Nice as well as Jonathan on how millennials promote equity. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Meet the Millennials. We are still joined by John and Nice in our discussion on employment equity. Before we continue with our conversation, let's watch a short video about a differently abled individual and his experience of finding a job in today's workforce.
Hi, my name is Jomar, and I am deaf. I grew up hearing actually, but when I was 4 years old, I lost my hearing. My parents and my lolo discussed that I shouldn't study because I am deaf, so I did not learn. I was just home alone with no one to talk to. In 2014, I left. Somebody told me that I could learn how to make shoes, so I pursued that.
I found Jomar actually when I visited Bicol. During my first visit, I was already informed that they had one deaf artisan in the community. So I was pretty much impressed because he was very skilled and he had so much potential.
I met Miss Camille through video call. She asked me if I wanted to work with her.
When I offered him the job of if he could work with us here in Metro Manila, he was very thrilled about it because it gave him hope. He had this new opportunity to begin again and start his new career again with us.
Now, I work at Everything Green. What I do, I make shoes, I sew, and I make patterns. Before, I did not know how to sign. Miss Camille helped me learn how to sign. I understand now how to communicate.
Nobody could understand him from his community in Bicol. He could just read very basic letters and just write his name. He doesn't really know the basic sign language as well. So we thought to enroll ourselves together with Jomar, and then we learned together. So it really helped us in terms of work efficiency and be able to also understand not just how they are in the workplace, but also understanding their feelings, understanding where they are coming from. We want a long, sustaining relationship, not just like a one-time livelihood activity, but also getting to know them in their personal lives as well.
Now, I feel happy. I feel safe. I was able to share with my community. Here, both the deaf and the hearing can communicate. I also help them when they ask me to teach them.
He's very, very expressive now, and he's ready to be out there, and he is proud of what he's doing, and he wants to inspire more deaf artisans and workers and show that he can make it after all what happened in his life before.
So, Jonathan, while I was watching that video, naalala ko what you said a while ago, na parang hindi naman siya talaga disability if our society adjusts to it. So, in Jomar's case, people around him do the sign language.
Yeah.
So, being deaf is not a disability in that context.
That's right. And what I love about, at least in the Philippines, we are actually positioned to apply equity. So for example, because we are the #1 country for BPO services, there are a lot of BPO companies today that hire deaf people specifically for chat services. Kasi before it was just voice, right? You have to do call centers and you have to speak. But now a lot of customer service activities happen on chat. So there are companies right now who actually do that. Their managers are also deaf, for example, and they make sure that that entire community is supported well. Because we want something that's scalable, diba? We don't want to hire deaf people just because there's just one pocket of opportunity. We want like seats across the board, and they also get to create their own circle of friends that makes them feel that they're really integrated into society.
Right. Ikaw, Nice, ano yung takeaway mo from the video?
Sobrang ganda ng inclusivity, at sa akin yung may-ari, nilagay niya yung shoes niya kay Jomar. Parang ang sarap ng merong ganong klaseng relasyon sa manggagawa at saka sa may-ari ng kumpanya. At nakita natin ano yung parang outcome nun sa mismong worker, gaano siya ka-motivated and inspired sa pagtatrabaho, kasi nauunawaan at nakikita ng employer paano siya nagtatrabaho, paano sila magko-communicate together. So, yung inclusivity sa akin, yun yung striking para dun sa video.
And I think what's special about that video is the employer, si Camille, siya yung nag-reach out kay Jomar to make the workplace an equitable one. So John, I want to ask you, are millennial leaders naman also responsive when it's their employees or their contractors who are demanding equity in the workplace? Mas responsive ba yung generation of leaders ngayon?
Definitely. In the corporate space today, there's what we call a psychological safety, which is the ability to vocalize what you think is right. Millennials are more vocal about demanding for justice. Even if it doesn't affect them, it affects their colleagues, for example, they will speak up. That's different from how Generation X are, which is, if it's not involving you, don't say something about it because it might affect you.
Right.
Right? In the case of millennials, when you see that something needs to be vocalized, or kunyari, like, oh, here's my friend, here's my colleague, it doesn't affect me at all, but I want to say something about them, I will say it to you because I know that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Ganun din ba yung experience niyo, Nice, especially talking to millennial employers?
Sa amin kasi, sa mga manggagawa sa Union, yung pinakamahalaga doon, kinikilala talaga yung karapatan ng mga manggagawang sumama at bumuo ng organisasyon. Yun yung vital and critical for us, yung pag-emphasize na fundamental right yan, karapatan nyo yan. So yun pa yung challenge ngayon sa aking tingin.
Oh, that's a really nice point that you made, Nice. Kasi nga may impression minsan na dapat magpasalamat ka na lang na mabait yung amo mo, pero minsan nakakalimutan natin na, teka lang, karapatan ko yan, whether mabait or hindi yung amo ko, karapatan ko yan. So meron kaming prepare ng mga statements. Hindi ko to statements, although karaniwan natin siyang naririnig, and I want to get your reaction. So the first statement is, why do employers need to pay our kasambahays, SSS, PhilHealth, and 13th month pay? Hindi ba enough na mabait naman tayo sa kanila, na meron naman silang libreng board and lodging, or meron namang free meals? So Nice, what's your take on that comment?
Sobrang mahalaga na merong social benefits yung ating mga kasambahay kasi manggagawa din sila. At yun yung isang major win natin, that the law recognizes that domestic work is work. Therefore, deserve din nila ng social protection katulad ng ibang mga manggagawa.
Right. John, how about you? This question also comes up in the corporate world. Na, why should I work with someone who has been diagnosed with autism? Hindi ba sakit lang sa ulo yan? How do you respond to these comments?
Again, it comes from someone who doesn't understand what autism is. The idea that having autism incapacitates you to simply write, read, or respond to an email is, ako sabihin ko na, the person's judgmental. And the person needs to educate themselves what autism is. Because if you look at the spectrum of autism, right, there are people who may have it but can fully, functionally accomplish a task given to you, even down to a vice presidential role.
Right. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a freelancer. So halimbawa, freelancer ako, tapos gusto kong sabihin dun sa nagkontrata sa akin na I don't want you making fun of my sexuality. Pero natatakot akong sabihin yun kasi baka hindi ma-renew yung contract ko, baka sabihan ako na ang hirap mo naman katrabaho, hindi ka na mabiro. What's your advice to people who are in this situation? Let's start with you, Nice.
Na may pro-protectang batas para sa kanila. Nandiyan na yung Safe Spaces Act. Ibig sabihin nun, kung ikaw nararamdaman mo na nahaharas ka sa lengguwahe, sa pagtingin sa'yo, meron kang karapatan na lumapit sa boss mo or sa company mo. Dapat meron Committee on Decorum and Investigation na tinatawag, no? Dahil hindi dapat natin tinotolerate ang any forms of violence sa workplace.
Kahit freelancers are covered by that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's very important to remember. Jonica, what do you think?
Same thing. In the same way that you demand people to customize how they approach you, sometimes when I see someone who's not open-minded enough to see how and who I am, I will not demand inclusion. I will demand at least tolerance. As long as I'm getting the right amount of fair pay, for example, I will tolerate the tolerance that you can give to me. And then slowly, inch by inch, maybe you will appreciate me for who I am because of what I do. In the next 6 months, because you found out that I'm so damn good in what I do, you'll appreciate for who I am, regardless of what my gender is.
Right. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Nice. I learned a lot from our discussion today. And thank you for being part of today's program. I think our discussion today underscores the responsibility of our generation, whether you're an executive, a contractual worker, or an employee, to take workplace equity seriously. I think many of us share the same aspiration. And thank you to our viewers. We look forward to reading your comments on CNN Philippines Facebook page, where you can also stream this episode. I am Nicole Corrado, and this is Meet the Millennials.
This episode of Meet the Millennials is presented to you by Sunmig Light. Get into the light life, Sunmig Light.